My name is Jeff Lush with the GitHub OSPO. Thanks so much for that introduction. I have a slide here with some of my contact information. We're going to take about 15 minutes here, as we know that is not a lot of time to fit in a lot of content. If you have some questions afterward, there's multiple ways to get in touch with me. I'd love to talk about this with you. So let's hop right into it. Here I'm going to talk about tools I'm making for myself and how I'm building them. You may find yourself in your OSPO getting this question all the time. I get multiple times a day. Somebody says, Jeff, should we use this open source project? Or is this project ready for release? Or we have this dependency that seems weird. Can we help them? Can we sponsor them? Can we give them money or resources? And how do you make that decision? And there's a lot of tools that are out there to help with component health. There's SaaS websites, there's individual scan tools. But what I find is that I have multiple checks. I want to look with this tool. I want to look with that tool. I don't always have the time to spin them all up and pull in JSON files from here and screenshots from there, et cetera, to kind of give that final answer, which is this a good project or not? What should we do? Can we fix it, et cetera? Sometimes you'll find yourself just at the top level saying, well, the license on the repo says this. And I looked and it looks like some human has changed the file in the last 3 months, and that's good enough. And that's not always good enough for me. I want to know more information. I want to know what this project does. I want to know its top level license. I want to look at its source code and see if there's embedded source code licenses that might cause me trouble. I want to look at its SBOM. I want to look and see how large and complex this project is. So many times somebody says, hey, should we give this project money or staff? And I look at it and it's, 150 lines of JavaScript. Is that even a project? Is that something that we should just be able to do ourselves as opposed to bringing in a third-party dependency? Or it's 1 million lines of code and nobody's touched it in 10 years. These are the types of questions I want to know. How popular is it, especially if I have two choices? Is it the most popular project in the world or is nobody using it? And are there alternatives? So very often I look at this and say, we're using it, it has a license problem. How do we swap it out? And these are all things that I run a billion tools a day when trying to look at these things. And what I've wanted to do is consolidate this into a single report. I want to make it personal to me. I don't have a development team. I saw one of the questions here is what's the biggest problem for your OSPO? And it's kind of lack of funding, which means lack of resources for engineering effort, et cetera. So I want to show today how I am using some of these new tools to using generative AI to build myself a personal OSPO tool that's just for me. Maybe I'll share it with my team. Maybe I'll share the prompts with everybody else, but this is to scratch one of the itches that I have. So you don't have to be a programmer. You don't have to be a software engineer to use generative AI. Hopefully this does not come off as a product pitch, et cetera. There's a lot of vendors that are out there that you can get this from. There's a lot of local LLMs that you can run locally to do the same type of activities here. So what I want to show how you can use this large language model CLI, and I'll explain what that is in just a second, to basically generate Python scripts and coordinate all these tools, generate reports, but also use that large language model at runtime to kind of do analysis or reparsing and things like that. So you can use your large language model to build a source code project. So I'm going to generate a Python app, but I can also use that at runtime through an SDK to do questions such as, hey, what are 3 alternatives to this open source project? That's a perfect question for an AI model, as opposed to me trying to figure out how would I do that with Python to figure out what isn't 3 alternatives for a project. So let's hop right into it in the interest of time. When I'm building these tools, or when I'm just doing it manually, is I have a bunch of sources of data. I might have these command line tools, like I might run a tool called clock, CLOC, to get the lines of code for a project. I might run the ScanCode Toolkit to do a deep license analysis of the source code files. I'm going to reach out to web APIs like the GitHub SBOM API to get the list of runtime dependencies for a project. I might go to a website. Maybe there's no API available. I might want to say, look at the GitHub contribution graph for the last 10 years for a project. That's a nice graph in the website, but there's no API that'll get me that data or get me that image, but I can do a screenshot. And so I'll talk some of the techniques that I'm using, but I'll use an open source project called Playwright to basically do a screenshot at runtime. I'm then going to take some of that information and use an LLM prompt. So I can actually use the large language model take that screenshot I just did of, say, the contribution graph and say, hey, can you characterize how healthy this project looks over the last 6 months? And the large language model will look at that image, knows it's a contribution graph, knows what's expected about a healthy project, and come back with kind of some human text that says, well, this is a healthy project, or it's a declining project, or it's an increasing project. And that's super, super helpful. Also, I might want to use some reusable policy. So I might have some like license config files. I say, here's my allow list, because I want to take this information from tool run to tool run to tool run. So I mix this all together and I generate myself an HTML report. This is a personal report. This is what I want to see. It's not flashy. It doesn't have animations. It doesn't have whatever. It's just so I can, right before a phone call, somebody can say, Jeff, I'm about to get on with this project. Tell me about it. I can run it from the command line, have it churn in the background, ring a bell on my terminal, bing, when it's all done. I can open up that report and take in all that data myself. And I'm going to act like a large language model and kind of digest it all and say, it looks good to me, or here's what I find a little problematic, or here's what we can do to help fix them out. So let's hop into a little bit of this. And I'm going to go through this pretty quickly here so I can get to the meat of it. But I'm going to want to generate a report that looks like this over the next couple pages. Give me just the facts. What's the repo? Give me a description of what this thing is. How popular with stars and forks, the declared license, what ecosystem, how many lines of code, and then kind of a project overview, including some of the license scanning that it's done that might be problematic. And this is a synthetic project I made for the sample here. But you can imagine very quickly, you look at this, say, I get a feeling. It's a very popular project. It's not used. Oh, it's got license problems. It's huge. It's small. It's for PyPy. It's for this. And that can really quickly get you the information you want. You can use the large language model to do some kind of analysis. Let's take a look at curl. Tell me about curl. It's very, very popular. It's one of the most popular open source projects. Well, give me some alternatives. Well, wget, HTTP, ARIA 2. This is super helpful, especially for probably the 99% of open source projects you've never heard of before. I know what Firefox is. I know what curl is. I know what this is. I don't know what a lot of these weird UI libraries that are buried deep in the stack. Let's use the large language model to figure that out. Give you that feeling for, hey, I'm going to look at the source code side of the world. I'm going to look at the SBOM side of the world for licenses, and so on and so on. So breaking down the SBOM, breaking down the licenses, using the large language model to basically categorize, these libraries are all for, say, Windows platform support. These are all for concurrency. These are all for cryptography and so on. So when you look at the bill of materials, you get this additional layer that's not coming from the tools. You're building on top of the data that you're getting. And also some really useful things that don't exist in the tools, like I like looking into the source tree and finding problematic areas where there's like buried GPL violations or things like that. This is all something that I was able to build with a CLI tool to then generate this report and then iterate as I use it, find problems, find usability issues, highlight things, etc. And these all come from prompts, and I'll show you how to do that right now. The other thing I'd like to say is, reaching out, doing screenshots, understanding what's there, using that large language model to review that. And then at the end, some fit and finish things. I'm going to run this report. Sometimes there's things that take a long time, like the contributor analysis might take a while, or the license scanning might take a while. How can I turn those things off? And using the CLI makes it super easy to generate new command line options, or say, I'm going to make an option called, dash fast, which means turn off all these slow command line options. It's really easy to prompt that. And 5 seconds later, you have a new tool that has that new command line option. So let's hop into how you might make a tool for yourself. So today, you can go out, download a LLM CLI. Like, for example, I use Copilot, the Copilot CLI. There's many others that are out there. Go install that, and I'll show you how to do that in just a second. And then there's this really common flow. Figure out what tool you want to bring into your report. Prompt it. So like, hey, write a Python script that runs, say, the clock tool on a GitHub repo, downloads that code, stores that code locally for reuse, get the line information and put it into an HTML report. I might want to use a Playwright to go take a screenshot of something, put that in the report, and so on and so on. And this is the typical flow. Pick a tool, process it in some way, and generate it into your final report. So to get started, you can go download the Copilot CLI. Here's some examples. If you just install, go do a search for how to install these things, you'll see it. It'll install it onto your command line tool, on your command line terminal, and it'll give you access to this tool. Basically, you'll log in, you'll launch it in the project directory you're interested in starting, log in, give your login information, and get going. And literally, you can start your first tool This is a prompt that I use to generate a useful tool, which basically says, create a Python project that takes a GitHub repo, get the source zip from this link. And it's really helpful with these tools to prompt it with, here's how you do it, give it examples. If you go to the zip file download link, this will give you the source tree. Keep it in a named directory, run the clock tool that's available on the path, take the output, put it into an HTML report. Also go to the repo and get the star count, fork count, declared licenses. If the clock tool is not available on the command line tool, write instructions to the terminal how to install it. So kind of make your tool self-documentary and then documenting. And at the end, play a bell character when the tool is done. And I give a silent command line option to run without the bell ringing. So this is what I prompted. The LLM goes out there, does classic code generation. That's great. You'll see in the background, there's some questions it asks. Hey, can I do this? Can I run this command? Yes, 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 yes. And when it's done, it'll tell you, I've now created you a new Python tool. Run it like this. Here's the ways, here's the instructions. Here's how you can generate an output report. You run that tool, and guess what? You have your first tool. This is a great way to get started, and then add your functionality. You might be bringing in other command line tools. You might be bringing in other web APIs, or doing using Playwright to do screenshots, etc. And so there's some really nice patterns that I have found. Wrapping that CLI tool. So you go and say, hey, Copilot, whatever. I have a tool on my command line. Run it, parse its output, put it into the report. Maybe do some caching if you find that you need to do want some speed. Do the same thing for screenshotting. Use Playwright to screenshot, etc. If you want to do analysis, hey, Copilot, you just took a screenshot of this URL. Please run this prompt on it, such as characterize if this is a healthy project or not. Use CSV files as policy from run to run, and then be able to do things such as creating nice graphics in your HTML report or adding flags to change the behavior. So each of these blocks is how I add new functionality to my tools that I build and write. And for example, the tool that I run probably 20 times a day these days, I basically did 14 prompts and some fine tuning here and there, but pretty much it was usable with the core prompt. I add the line counting. I added ScanCode for code source code analysis. I added license flagging and with giving it that CSV file for my policy, and so on and so on and so on. And you iterate, and you can build your tool. One of the things that's super helpful is I'm not a UI designer, but I had a prompt that said, hey, for the data that you found with ScanCode, build a collapsible HTML file tree that only shows the files with licenses from the ScanCode scan that are not mentioned in my license CSV file. And that is what allows me basically to go in, click on these, find the anomalies, find the license problems. I told it to keep a local copy of the downloaded zip file of the source and render it in a new tab. So when I click on one of those blue links, it opens up the source file and I can see that license. So these are nice ways to make that personal tool. I'm going to skip in the interest of time. You'll have access to these slides where I've talked about some of these prompts and why it's useful. But one thing I just want to end up here is it's really helpful to also make multiple reports. So you might make a markdown report, an HTML report, a CSV report. It makes it super easy just to prompt and say, put the data in this format, and this format. And then as you need it, be able to render it. It also allows you from report to report and scan to scan to say, look at these older files, maybe if you're making historical comparisons, et cetera. So with that, I'm getting up on my 15 minutes here. I just wanted to show that off. And if you have any questions or you want some follow-up, just reach out to me through those links, and I can answer some questions now or follow up with you afterward. Thanks again for your time.